and forensic psychologist Dr. Lawrence Miller and criminal defense attorney Joseph Tully. We know that Ryan Ruth has been charged with 2 federal gun charges, and now we have learned that prosecutors intend to ask the grand jury to indict him on a charge of attempted assassination. Joseph, what legally constitutes an assassination attempt?
An assassination attempt is an act done in furtherance of it that would have led to an assassination that was, but for being interrupted, would have led to the assassination. So buying a gun won't do it, but buying a gun, going to a place and sitting in a sniper's nest, that's probably enough to get indicted.
You know, which is what he is said to have done. One of the biggest revelations has been this letter the suspect Ryan Ruth sent to a witness months before this incident. This witness has not been publicly named. The letter details Ruth's intentions to kill former President Trump, among other things. Joseph, what do you make of the discovery of this letter?
Well, at this point, I'm applying the mechanics of it to what the government prosecutors will do. Here, there's a letter saying this was an assassination attempt, but I failed. But somebody needs to finish the job. I'll offer $150,000. So, in terms of the prosecution being able to take this case to a grand jury and get an indictment, I think they will use the letter as an intent. You don't know what's going on inside somebody's head. You can't hit a printer button and get their thoughts, but you can look at their actions and the circumstantial evidence. And this letter is perfect circumstantial evidence that prosecutors will argue was his intent to assassinate President Trump.
Yeah, I want to get into the specifics of this letter with you, Dr. Miller. Let's start with the portion in which he's speaking in the past tense. It reads, quote, "This was an assassination attempt on Donald Trump, but I failed you." He goes on to say, quote, "It's up to you now to finish the job." So, Doctor, what does this letter tell you about his mindset?
Well, that portion of it indicates someone who did not expect to survive the event. When people talk about themselves in the past tense about a future event that's going to happen, what they're doing is they're anticipating not being around when the letter is read. So
yeah. We're having
suicide.
Yeah, we're having trouble
by cop notes that individuals left.
We're having trouble with your audio, unfortunately. Let's move on to talk about what we know about was found on the scene. Investigators say they found 6 cell phones in Ruth's car, one with information about how to get to Mexico from Palm Beach, where the assassination attempt happened. A handwritten list of dates and venues of Trump's appearances, a scope with his fingerprints on it, we're told, a rifle loaded with 11 bullets, 1 in the chamber. Joseph, how do these items help the prosecution's case?
Sure. So the only defense in this case was, listen, this was a publicity stunt. This guy doesn't like President Trump. He views him as a threat. He wanted to do a very extreme publicity stunt. And what the evidence that you just talked about does is it kind of closes in on that defense and really makes that defense not palpable in a courtroom. You know, if you're going to do a publicity stunt, you're not going to have a getaway plan. You're not going to have 6 different cell phones. While there are, some elements that don't quite add up here, and his effect afterwards of smiling and being very laid back doesn't really jive with a serious crime here. All these other elements of this evidence does really paint a picture that this really was an assassination attempt, and he was seriously going to take President Trump's life.
Right after this happened, CNN spoke to Ryan Ruth's son, who essentially said these allegations against his father were shocking. He said the father he knew was kind and caring and wouldn't do anything crazy, much less something violent. Some are saying Ruth was somehow politically radicalized. How could this, do you imagine, be used in his defense? This whole idea of being politically radicalized?
Sure. So, sometimes a trial is about whether or not somebody did something. And sometimes a trial, if you don't have a defense, it really is about sentencing. And so specifically the crime of an attempted assassination on a president, it can be punishable by life, but the code, the law is that it can be punished by any number of years. So what this can do is, even if there was a trial and even if there was a conviction, the defense attorney can show throughout the course of trial or at a sentencing hearing that, this individual was a good person and just got radicalized. And he, was unduly influenced, or he was swayed by really by the constant and belligerent campaign against Donald Trump that some might say it exists, or on certain channels it certainly does exist. So it might give mitigation to the defense.
They're asking for a grand jury to bring that attempted assassination charge against Ruth. Assuming that happens, what is the process once that indictment comes?
So once they get an indictment from the grand jury, then they file that in court, as it's called a true bill, and that becomes the charges. And after that, that's basically the kickoff. The end of that phase is the jury trial. So it kicks off with an arraignment where the accused goes to court. They hear the charges and they plead not guilty, and they either do a speedy trial or a not speedy trial. I don't think they'll do a speedy trial in this case because it's so serious. But ultimately, at the end of that road is the jury trial.
Criminal defense attorney Joseph Tully, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.